Our first keynote speaker is Professor Tong, who is, of course, very well known in the signal processing community. He's a fellow of the IEEE. He's nominated as a distinguished lecturer by the Signal Processing Society, and he has many, many best paper awards. Actually, I think that his list of best paper awards is longer than his list of papers. So join me in welcoming Professor Tong.
It's a tremendous honor for me to be here at this special occasion. Unlike many of you, I didn't have the opportunity to work with Hagit, but I know many of her work, admire of his scientific accomplishment, the depth and the breadth of the work is a good example for me. I apologize to have a title that is so impossibly to accomplish. It's signal processing for power grid. I've been working on energy system for the past 4 or 5 years. It's a very broad subject. Initially, I thought I would I have to talk to something that's reasonably well formulated. So I apologize to Hagit to have this title, in fact. I will talk about something related to the security of a power grid. I will say a little bit more about the so-called person in the middle attacks of a power grid. Let me just say a few words about the background. There are a lot of discussions about the cybersecurity, more recently focusing on cyber infrastructure, power grid being one of them. So this is an article from Wall Street Journal in 2009. It claims that cyber spies has penetrated US power grid and the left softwares. I guess luckily nothing was done and the software was not activated to do any harm. But that was a tremendous worry, that raised a tremendous worry among many people, politicians and researchers as well. This is something that's more real. I think many of you may know, probably more than I do. So this is apparently an attack on a nuclear power plant. It was first reported in 2009. It mentioned that apparently some software has penetrated. This actually is the first indication of something wrong. Later, it was confirmed that indeed there was some software that was penetrated the nuclear power plant and caused it caused centrifuge and run faster and faster and caused tremendous damage. Much later, it was discovered. The mechanism gradually was studied, and it was discovered that it starts with a thumb drive that was infected some of the computers, and people who get access on those computers, their thumb drives get infected, and eventually these virus find the controllers of the nuclear power plant. Now, what is really interesting about the mechanism of this attack is the so-called man in the middle attack. So it has two aspects of this. Obviously, the software needs to do some real damage to the system, but what is really interesting is that it also creates an illusion to the system monitors that nothing wrong. There's nothing happening. Okay. So this attack really has twofold purposes. One is creating damage. Second is to prevent any actions that will be taken by the so-called man-in-the-middle attack. Okay. So now I also want to mention this event. This is the Northeast blackout in 2003. As you can see that this is the part of the United States that disappeared at night. Now, it was the cause of these things had actually happened rather purely by accident. Now, one of the power lines was overheating, and at the same time, very similar to the man-in-the-middle attack in the Iran nuclear power plant situation, there was a bug in the power system monitoring system. And apparently, it seems to the operator that nothing wrong was happening. Okay. Therefore, because of one line was down, it caused the cascade failures. Okay. Now, this is purely by accident. One would then wonder that what if someone is trying to do this through a cyber attack? On the one hand, it will blind the operator's ability to monitor the system. On the other hand, unknowing to the operators, something far worse happening. Okay. So obviously, this is a great concern to many people. This is a working group that put out a vision for having a secure cyber-physical system. It has a goal of by 2020, there should be a resilient energy delivery system that are designed, installed, and operated and maintained to survive a cyber-physical attack. Okay. So then many actions taking place as recent as this year. So Pentagon has established a program aimed at protecting nations' power grid. Okay, so this is sort of the background. I'm going to talk about primarily on what are the abilities through cyber attack that can confuse the operator of a power grid. Okay, so I will first describe the model. As we do signal processing, that's perhaps is the most important and interesting aspect of that. I will describe essentially how data get collected. I will talk about state estimation. Then I will talk about what our state estimates are used. Although this has been, state estimation has been in place for 50 years. At this point, it has been used in a very limited way. So the one I'm going to talk about is how state estimates affect the real-time pricing. Okay. So, and I will talk about what happens if data are manipulated or changed. What will happen with the price, with the real-time price. Then I will talk a little bit about what are mechanisms you can launch attack, and what are the mechanisms to prevent such attack. Okay, so now it's all in the familiar territory of signal processing. Okay, so this is a basic diagram of, you can view the power system as a graph with these vertices are the so-called buses, and they are connected with the generators and also the loads. And these lines, you view them as transmission lines. Now these boxes here are meters. These are where sensors are deployed and measured. So this is far less elegant than this, and this is what's called the switch yard, and where all the measurements are taken. Okay. There are two types of measurements, however. One is called the digital measurements. That measures the line breaker status, whether two lines are connected or disconnected. The other one is so-called analog data. In older time, these are power flow measurements. In modern days, you have so-called phasor measurement units that measure directly the voltage phasors on the bus. Okay, but anyway, you have two types. You have a digital data that describe the topology of the network, and analog measurements that give you the actual physical quantities associated with this network. Okay. So we will view the power grid as a graph with algebraic constraints, which means that we only worry about the steady state behavior of the network. In such a network, so the graph, the set of vertices are a set of buses, a set of lines are a set of transmission lines. Now the state of the power system is the voltage phasors on each bus, which is a complex number, has a magnitude and a phasor on it. Okay? So what we measure to this, what the things are sent to the control center are the digital data that describe the network topology and analog measurements that relate the measurements and actually the network state, which is of course also a function of the topology. And then you have noise. Okay, so this is the simple model, a graph with algebraic constraints. And this function is a nonlinear function. And it has a mild level of nonlinearities as cosine in them. Okay, so what does the power grid use these state estimation for? Okay, so the analog data and the digital data comes into this box. So the first thing you will do is to figure out what is the network topology. And once you have the network topology, you try to estimate the state. And to a signal processing person, this is terribly boring. If the topology is correct, you do least squares. Okay, that's what people do. In fact, when I first learned this thing, I said there's nothing about the states. I mean, there's no dynamics in it, but this is what people do right now. So after you have estimated state, that doesn't stop there, because there are many, many measurements that are actually bad measurements. Measurements are missing, measurements that are having too much noise. So there is a block here that does the so-called bad data detection. Okay. So very simple-minded detection problem. So what you do is you have your estimated system state, and you look at the residue error. If the residue error is too large, you say bad. I'm not going to use this data to do anything. If the residue error is small, you say good. Okay, we're going to use it to do something. Okay. Obviously, one can think about far more sophisticated way of doing that. For example, you can do a joint state estimation and the topology recovery. Right? But anyway, so this is what they do. Two separate things. You use the digital data to estimate topology, and once you have topology, you try to estimate the states, and you do bad data detection. Okay, so what do you do with the state estimates? Now, this is what's being implemented at the moment by roughly by PJM. It's an independent system operator. So once you have the real-time data, okay, so you estimate the topology, and from the topology, you are able to see which line of the power network is congested. Okay. Apparently, the price of electricity really depends on the pattern of congestion. Okay, I'll show you how this is get calculated. So one of the important things is to estimate what are the lines that are congested and what are the generators that has reached its capacity limits. So these are constraints that become binding, are the things that will affect the real-time price. Okay. So here is the state estimates. Not all the things are used. It is the congestion pattern and also the set of generators that are eligible to generate that will determine the so-called real-time price. Okay, so the problem I will be looking at is how these things will be affected when someone is manipulating on the real-time data. Okay, So a little bit about how these get calculated. Like all prices problem, the electricity price, in fact, is calculated through a simple linear program. Okay, so every generator will submit its bits on how much it costs you to generate. Then you go through the so-called locational marginal price calculation. Okay. It is locational because at different locations of the network, the price of electricity, understandably, would be different. Okay. How they are different depends very much on whether which line get congested, which line is free to transmit. If there is no congestion in the network, everybody would have paid exactly the same amount. Okay. So in this calculation, there are two parameters that are most important. One is the Lagrange multiplier associated with this balance of transmission and the demand, generation and demand. The second is the Lagrange multiplier associated with the lines that become congested. Okay. Complicated looking optimization, but in the end it's simple. It's simply a linear program. What is most important in these things are the red symbols that are function of the actual real-time data. Okay. Now, how is it calculated? So once you solve this linear program, you can simply substitute this, and you get a long vector that each entry of the vector is the real-time price at a particular location. This is a large system. The system of Texas has state variables of 10,000 dimensional high. Okay, so very large system, in fact. That optimization doesn't give you a clear picture of how data actually would come into play. Here, there is actually a geometric way to see this problem. So I can view a state space, so that is plotted as the yellow plane here. So at any moment, the state of a power network is one point in this state space, because it's an n-dimensional space. Now, each one of these lines corresponds to a linear equation. So this linear combination of the states is greater than certain value. So this is the, you can view that the power flow at each line is a linear combination of the state of the system. So this line would represent a particular congestion condition. Okay. On one side of this line, it will be congested. On the other side of this line, would not be congested. Okay. So as I said, the price of a system really depends on the congestion pattern of the network. So you can partition for all the lines, you can partition the whole state space by these hyperplanes. And at any moment, the system is on one of these regions. Now, what the previous linear program shows is that within each one of these regions, there is a single price. Okay, so you can view that the price is, you partition the whole map into regions, and each region has a single price. Now, where the price you are paying in real time depends on where you are located in the system. Okay, so each price region would correspond to one particular congestion pattern, and once you have the state estimates, then you can compute what should be the price. Okay, so what happens if you have error? In state estimates, we don't actually get exactly where the state is. So suppose I have a state at this particular part of the state space, and my measurement will be a mapping to some observation space. And of course, you will have error in your measurements. When you do state estimates, if your estimate is of the true state is stay within the same region, then you'll actually get the correct price. Now, if on the other hand, you have a much bigger error caused either naturally or by malicious actions, your estimated states may wind up at a different region, and therefore you have a different price. Okay. So in order for error to have an impact on the price of electricity, you would have to move your estimate away from one region to the other. Okay. Now, what happens if you change the topology? Okay. That creates a different, that creates a different mechanism of changing price. Again, you have this. So if you change topology, you wind up either adding a particular congestion or deleting a particular congestion, because network topology changes and line changes. Okay. So what happens with this kind of additional deletion is that it will change one of the parameters in the system, which is a function of topology, and therefore the price is changed on all different regions. So if you change the estimates, it will change only the price on one place. If you change the topology, in fact, the price in all regions will be changed. What is important here is the locational marginal price may have a huge change, even if you delete a single line. And the change happens is global. Okay, so this is roughly how the locational marginal price is defined. So now I'm going to focus on what happens if someone is trying to manipulate the data. Okay, so this paper is inspired many work, follow-up work, and apparently was credited for the first one who pointed out the potential of attack. This is focused mainly on the analog data. So you have analog data, you take the measurements, you change it to something else. Okay. So in the end, if you change the measurement, you will change the estimate of the states. You may move the actual state from one region to the next, therefore the price change. Okay. Now, a more sophisticated attack is in fact change simultaneously both try to move the state as well as change the topology. Okay. So what happened is that you can, for example, delete some of the congestion lines or add additional fake congestion lines that will affect the price globally. Okay. Let me describe the model. It's an extremely simple idea. So if you have the digital data, and suppose you have the correct network topology, and if we look at locally, it's a linearized model, so-called DC model, your measurement will simply be a linear function of the state and plus additive noise. What if someone introduced an attack? You can introduce an attack by change the digital data and create a different topology, or you can add a perturbation of your measurement so that the control center will simply operate a wrong set of data. So now your option is what kind of perturbation you should be able to introduce to cause possibly the largest possible change of locational marginal price. Okay. So this is a very simple idea proposed by Liu. And so this is the additional data you are introducing. And obviously, you shouldn't be introduce arbitrary data because you have access to only a subset of meters that you can manipulate. So this set A describes a constraints that someone tried to launch attack, what he can do. So the entries of this A would be equal to 0 if that particular meter is somehow protected. Okay. So the idea is this: if I can choose an attack vector that is generated from the columns of H. If I'm able to do that, I simply will be able to perturb the actual state along that line, almost arbitrarily. Okay. To a control center, the x and x plus delta x, there is no difference to it. So there is no way any kind of bad data detection could figure out this is in fact is attack. The attack is undetectable. So given a set of meters that you allow an adversary to have access, or it's not protected, one may ask, when does this condition exist? So when is it possible you can actually launch an attack that cannot be detected? This, in fact, has a direct connection, probably not surprisingly, to the notion of observability. Okay? Essentially, it says that if I have, this is the system matrix. Okay? So this is the set of meters that are not protected. Now, if the meters that an adversary cannot have access to will give you a submatrix that has full column rank, then no matter what this adversary is trying to do, eventually it will get caught. Okay? So an attack is detectable if and only if this submatrix that cannot be, it's not accessible by adversary, has full column rank. Conversely, of course, if the adversary controls too many meters, or have access to too many meters, there are clearly multiple states. He will be able to influence multiple states. Okay. Now, how do we actually check a particular power grid whether this condition can be satisfied or not? Okay. In fact, this kind of rank condition, or whether something is full rank or not, numerically you can check with some, actually the system parameter, but the rank condition should not really depend on the actual values of the system parameter. What you could do, there is a graph techniques that will give you an equivalent test. So here is a network, okay? So how do we prevent? So the practical question is, if we are able to put additional securities on some of these meters, what are the selections I should do in order so that no matter what adversary will do, I will be able to catch it? Okay. The simple condition is actually this. You find the spanning tree of this network, and you implement extra security on at least 1 meters on the spanning tree. And if that is done, then no matter what the adversary is doing, eventually you should be able to detect. Okay. So the network is protected if the spanning tree of the network is protected. Okay. Because spanning tree gives you the essential characteristic of an observable network. Now, what if an adversary is able to change the topology? Okay. Without changing topology, the only thing you could do is to move the measurements from one place to the next, and you are restricted on a particular hyperplane. But if the adversary can change the topology of the network, in fact, you map from one hyperplane to somewhere else. That gives an adversary a far greater capability to define or to look for an attack that cannot be detected. Okay. So I want to show just a little bit about what happens if that's the case. Okay. One can also define sort of a statistical notion of something being undetectable, by which we mean that if for any detection algorithm, you essentially will do no better than flipping the coin. Okay, so that we call this. So the results here actually applies to both cases. Here then one can show that if the adversary is allowed to change from one topology to a next, so attack from the actual topology G to G bar, and such an attack is undetectable if and only if the system matrix for the true topology, this is system matrix for the changed topology, this column space is in fact is contained in the column space of H bar plus the basis vector that define the attack. Okay, it's easy to check. In in fact, what is important is to show that, so so any attack in this case can be written as simply the linear combination of this. And you can see that if this is a subset of that, you will always, so this is the actual system state, X will always be written as something like that. Okay, so this will be the state that the adversary will change the actual location. This will be the actual attack case. You can show conversely that's also true. But this is a rather difficult condition to verify in practice. What we hope to do is something similar to the pure data attack case. We want to find conditions under which if you protect a subset of meters, then any attack will be detectable. Okay. So for example, the first thing you will ask, so this is a case that all the spanning tree of the network is protected. Then you ask, is this good enough if someone tries to change topology? In fact, it's quite clear that it's not good enough. For example, the adversary can change the measurements around locally this particular line to make this line appear to be not existing. Okay. So you need something far stronger. Okay. So describe a simple actual technique to protect the network. We call it the cover-up protection. So here is the network. What you would do is, first of all, you find some spanning tree, okay? And you want to protect the spanning tree. And we know that protecting spanning tree is not good enough, because you need something a little bit more. Second, you find a set of vertices that the lines connecting to these vertices coupled with the spanning tree will cover the entire network. Okay. For example, this particular vertex has these can protect the additional 2 lines, and this vertex protects 3 additional lines, and every line somehow is covered. Okay. So the cover-up protection simply first protect at least 1 meter on all these on the spanning tree, and then you protect the injection meters on these special vertices. Together, all lines are covered. Okay. So one can then show that any topology attack will become detectable if these special these meters are protected, either by software or hardware. In fact, one can show that, of course, this strategy is sufficient for both state and topology attacks. And for networks, for certain networks, this is the best you can do. I mean, there is no better way in essence, this result cannot be strengthened for general networks. Okay. Just as an example, this is the bus system. All the green lines represent the spanning tree of the network. And here you need to protect these 3 additional meters so that all the lines are actually covered. Okay. You can look at even bigger network. This is a 118 bus system. For which you could, first you find the spanning tree, and roughly you get about 30% of the meters have to be protected for these networks, so that any attack on both the state or the topology will be detected. Okay. How much time? Yeah. Okay. In fact, this kind of local attack can be implemented rather easily. So you ask what kind of information you need to launch an attack. So this is a simple line removal attack that what you have, if you want to make one line disappear, you just have to redistribute the power measurement to the rest of the network. Right? So that's just an illustration of something like that. So this kind of attack, unless these meters are, unless the meters attached to something like these are protected, then there is no way for you to detect them. So this is simple doing simulations and see how well you can detect. You can't. How big an impact it has on a network. So this is a calculation on, there are about 19 lines on this system. Okay, so suppose you launch a topology attack to make this line disappear or make that line disappear. This is how much change that one may have in terms of the locational marginal price. What's the percentage change? The behavior of change actually is quite mysterious. It's not clear. It's clearly some lines are far more important than others. Yeah, so that one can also compare the percentage change, whether attack on state only, on topology, how big a difference. So you can see that if you attack on topology, a much bigger change that can in price can result. Let me just conclude here. So the topology attack also attacks on the state. May actually have rather serious consequences. Right now, it is assumed that people don't react to price. The load are simply are price takers. Now, if demand respond to price, if someone is manipulating data, that clearly can cause far more complicated behavior, the network behavior, when people do respond to price, especially in real time. Some of the attacks can be launched by very simple mechanisms, using only local information. And the topology attacks, these kind of attacks can be made detectable, only in the asymptotic sense, by implementing extra security measures. Essentially what's needed is that when data from a particular sensor sent to the control center, it need to be authenticated. It need to have a little bit of extra things to make sure that the data you have are not tampered. Okay. So there's some reference that we have done. So thank you.
Any questions? I have one question.
Yeah.
Is there a way to protect the network from a statistical point of view? Saying, for example, unless someone will perturb 5% of the meters or something like that.
Yeah, so this is a big mystery to us. So in general, the question is, if you have a general network, what's the percentage of meters you should implement extra protection? So the examples I gave is roughly around 30%. But I think if you look at maybe a random network, one may be able to get a stronger, more general results. Right now, I don't have anything to say. But implementing extra authentication code will cause you some delays. So you want to have that number minimum being as small percentage as possible. Actually, the interesting theoretical question is, what's the minimum percentage of nodes need to be protected so that you cannot, you will be detected? I don't know. I can simulate. I have an algorithm to say what is, which meter you should attack. I give you condition. But in general topology, I don't know.